Hey there everyone, JJ from the Sunday Morning Sumo Show. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than normal. I'm going to do a sort of spotlight, sort of breakdown of one of my favorite wrestlers. If you like this and you want to see more, give us a like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see what happens. Ichiyamamoto is one of my favorite wrestlers, and when I say that, I get a little bit of a chuckle in response, but I can't help it. I really like this guy. His first tournament in the top division just so happened to be the first tournament that I actually followed on a day-to-day basis. And while there were other things going on that tournament,
Hakuo attacks. Once again, Hakuo goes for the kote and again down goes Tenno Fuji. Hakuo with a shout. He wins the championship. Zensho Yusho number 16.
I couldn't help but root for the guy that, to me, felt as new to this as I was. It felt like, I don't know any of these guys, and neither does this dude, so I'm gonna root for him. And you know what? He did pretty well, all things considered. Honestly, I thought about going back really far and looking at these tournaments as well, starting from here and doing up to now, but holy shit, that would be way too much, and couldn't do it. So here we go. Fast forward a couple of years with some good performances, some middling performances, and some quite poor ones back to back. My guy fell down from the low Maegashira ranks into the second division, and honestly, it looked a little rough. And then he had two of his best tournaments back to back. September 2023 is where we got peak Ichiyamamoto. This dude had been grinding away at the lower ranks of top division for nearly 2 years at this point, and while he was never extremely successful down there, his performances here really goes to show that he is not a Juryo level wrestler. Ichiyamamoto is an Oshi specialist, meaning that if he gets his way, his matches should look like this. Limited interactions off the tachiai that resemble a brawl more than a fight. Against guys like Abi, he'd have trouble, but against then upcomers Tenshoho and the future Shirokuma, he had little. We even get to see him pull out some grappling techniques, which we don't get all that often from him. My guy has a style, and it's definitely belt averse. That doesn't mean that he can't pull out a surprising belt grab and drive every now and then, though, as we'll see later on, he's far less confident doing this against guys in the higher ranks. We even get to see him pick up a win over Onosato, who at this point has reached the rank of Ozeki. He won using a thrusting attack to the neck, a Norowa, and then a rapid pull down afterwards. A fun little combo that we're going to see a lot of in his future matches. Of course, he did pick up a few losses, but they were just kind of regular Ichiyamamoto losses. One where he ends up losing a brawl to Bushozan, another where he's parried to the ground by Kitanowaka. But even at Juryo 7 West, a 13-2 record is undeniable, and Ichiyamamoto would later find himself back up in the top division come November. After the absolutely stellar tournament that we got in Juryo, I kind of expected to see a return to middling normalcy. Instead, we got to see a continuation of his hot streak and his best performance in top division so far. Like in the last tournament, we got to see an Ichiyamamoto determined to impose his style of sumo. Of the 11 wins that he did get, about 7 of them came while he was moving forward. His fight against Tamawashi was probably the best Oshi match. His fight against Churanumi displays one of the core weaknesses of his style, namely that when he's going forward, he's going very forward. Since this is sumo, pretty much anything can happen during a match. But Ichi isn't really strong enough to do pure Oshi against everybody up here. Take his match against Ryuden, for example. Right off the bat, Ryuden completely stops all of Ichi's forward momentum, which makes him circle to the right while pulling down, successfully throwing Ryuden off balance. He does the same sort of pull attempt on Nishikifuji, and it works, but it brings him dangerously close to the bales. He's not often always so good at judging this distance. His losses were fairly standard: a brawl with Sadanumi that ended with Ichi going backwards, a failed pulldown on Hirodumi, and a solid parry from Daisho, a much more seasoned Oshi wrestler specialist. Plus, we got a henka from Midori Fuji. Also, poor Tsurugisho, man. Still, with an 11-win, 4-loss record, Ichiyamamoto picked up a Junyusho, a Fighting Spirit prize, and would be promoted from Maegashira 14 West to his career-high rank of Maegashira 7 East. Ichi was not ready for the new year. The single-digit Maegashira wrestlers tend to be hardened salarymen, veterans in a bad spot, or up-and-coming elites that just aren't quite there yet. And guys like Ichi, who have a good tournament here and then, find themselves in way over their head. Ichi only got 5 wins this tournament. His match against Nishikigi was probably the most decisive of the 5, and even this comes with the caveat that my man totally went early. Every other win came in the form of a pull. His matches against Takara Fuji and Shiranomi were both Oshi heavy, with both men failing because of their own balance being too far forward. Against Hirodumi and Mitakiyumi, he looked far more intent with his pulls, very clearly going for a Nodowa into pull-down combo, and that's something that we see quite often from him. As far as losses go, I mean, man, I got a lot that I can look at here, but I'm not gonna look at every single one, because, wow. Against Abi, Asanoyama, and Tsurugisho, it just looks like all 3 of them got the better of him off the tachiai. A little bit of an Oshi thing against some of them, but it just never kicks off. Unfortunate, but it is the way that it is. His fight against Sadanumi at least looked okay. I mean, the veteran managed to enter into an Oshi battle with him for a little bit before getting a parry that allowed him to get to the right side, which made it easy to drive Ichi out. His most entertaining fight wasn't even a match that he won. It was against Myogiryu, who almost slaps Ichi down right off the tachiai, only to then get into a total threshing match with a lot of really great back and forth that Ichi does eventually fall to. Ultimately, M7 just proved to be way too much for Ichi to handle. 5 wins, 10 losses shunts him back down into the familiar grounds of the double-digit Maegashira ranks. It may not have looked it based on his January performance, but his time in Juryo must have done something to him, because prior to that little stint in Juryo, he spent most of his time around M15 to M13. He struggled a little bit here at M11, but he was definitely able to fare much, much better than he did in January. He had some straight-up fantastic Oshi wins this tournament. He looked relentless in his match against Nishiki Fuji, where he just battered away at the Isegahama wrestler until he was out. His matches against Shodai and Koroshoho, though, were both absolute bangers. I mean, just really, really great Oshi. We also got to see his 10th ever Uwatanage against Hokuto Fuji. After a while of them both leaning against one another, I actually had to cut this one down to keep it from running way too long. A lot of the losses he had this time were also fairly standard. Though of the 8 that he had this basho, only a few of them were really worth noting. Mitakeyumi and Dayamami both used their size to their advantage and forced Ichi past the bales. Some of his losses, the other ones, were far more entertaining though. For some reason, he tried to go chest to chest with Shonan Naomi, and that resulted in him getting tossed down. He had a quite a long belt battle with Roga, and I don't know why he thought that was a good idea. I love the little hand motion that Roga does here. It's kind of like, get the fuck out of here. He was looking pretty damn good against Takayasu for a while there, but eventually the former Ozeki got him to the bales, and I love how confused Takayasu seems here. My absolute favorite match, bar none, of Ichi's matches this tournament was his one against Kitanowaka. After his initial attack fails to gain any ground, Ichi starts moving backwards towards the bales while attempting a pull down on Kitanowaka, and then he just keeps trying to pull him down. Ultimately, 7 wins and 8 losses at Maegashira 11 East isn't all that bad, when before he was usually sitting around Maegashira 14. Next basho, he would find himself sitting at Maegashira 12. I've always personally had more fun with the guys that have a slow rise in rank as opposed to the meteoric rises of guys like Onosato. Those guys finding their ceiling in the Sanyaku is fun, but so is Ichi going into the last day of the next 4 tournaments in a row on 7 wins and 7 losses. This time, a solid 5 of these were because of pushing and thrusting. We had a couple of pull downs and a fortunate Fusen win for good measure. I don't know what it is, but Ichi's sumo in May looked damn good. Nishiki Fuji, Shonan Naomi, and Tsurugisho all just get blasted back off the initial charge. In all 3 cases, his tachiai lands on the shoulder just right, getting his opponent's balance up and back, allowing him to drive them backwards. In addition, we did get to see some pull-down attempts from Ichi, and while his match against Roga was probably the cleanest pull-down we got from him, it wasn't the only one. In fact, Rick from Kinboshi Sumo calling it a panic pull is completely fair. Ichi attempts this move in several matches that he loses. Against Toki Hayate, Takara Fuji, and Takanosho, Ichi tries the pull down while he's on the back foot. But in all 3 cases, his opponents had already taken him far too close to the bales for that to work, and he couldn't complete the attack before being driven over. Although it's not quite fair to say that all of his losses came with Ichi being on the complete back foot. Kinbozan and Tomokaze both managed to slap him down while he was on the offense. So, not all bad. But eventually he did find himself going into day 15 on 7 wins and 7 losses, like I mentioned at the start of the tournament. And he was pitted up against the veteran's veteran, the Iron Man Tamawashi, who incidentally was also sitting at 7-7. One of the reasons why I love this kind of matchup, Darwin match as we call it. Ichi just barely manages to win by pulling Tamawashi down while on the bales. This performance would see him going up a whole rank from Maegashira 12 to Maegashira 11, getting closer and closer to the single-digit Maegashira ranks. I have a lot to say about July. 5 out of his 8 wins involved Ichiyamamoto going on the offense. Against Nishikigi and Kageyaki, we got to see him pull out a few Yorikiri wins, which we don't really get all that often. Granted, it took him quite a while to get the momentum going against Nishikigi. We also got to see him do some great pushing attacks. For instance, against Chiyoshoma, he attempted a pull on the back of the head, which created an opening that he exploited for a drive. Against the former Ozeki Shodai, he was all offense the entire time. It really looked like Shodai had no answer to anything that Ichi could put up. It's great to see him get his rhythm off like this. It's really fun. Shodai wasn't the only former Ozeki that Ichi fought this tournament. He also went up against Asanoyama, who had recently climbed up to the Sanyaku again, but has missed a basho, and had, as a result, fallen out of Komusubi. Going into this fight, Asanoyama was looking good. He was on 3 wins, 0 losses. But Ishii drove Asanoyama back from the tachiai. It looked like he wanted to plant his left foot on the bales, Asanoyama. And man, doesn't look good. It's been 3 whole tournaments since this happened, and Asanoyama is still absent. Probably the biggest match for Ichi in this tournament, though, was his first fight against Wakataka Kage.
Wow.
It's no secret that Ichi is a bit of a fanboy of Waka, and honestly, I thought that Ichi was going to be in for it. And off the bat, it looked like it was all Wakataka Kage. But with quick footwork and a diabolical left hand, Ichi got an Uwatenage win. Really good work. A fair number of his losses came from Ichi being on the offensive as well. Midori Fuji and Nishiki Fuji both slapped him down with a well-timed parry. Though there was a really fun match where Roga does some sort of Henka turned shoulder throw. My favorite of his losses, though, was in his match against Tamawashi, who just sort of like catches him off the tachiai and yeets him into the crowd while just sort of circling away. It was unfortunate for Ichi, but just fun all around. All of it leading into day 15, where he faced off against Oshoma for their first ever matchup. Honestly, I think these guys are quite similar in parts of their style. Both men like to employ pull and slap down attacks. Right off the tachiai, Ichi lashes out with thrusting attacks, bringing Oshoma back and up, then turning him to the side. Once you're in this position, there's almost nothing that can be done. A really good win from Ichi, bringing him to 8-7 and bringing his rank up into the single digits. Maegashira 9 East. September was the first time that Ichiyamamoto made it back into the single-digit Maegashira ranks since January, and back then he got absolutely spanked. Remember, he closed out with a 5-win, 10-loss record. Not great. Not what you want to see from a guy who you think is your favorite. This time, things weren't nearly as dire. There were some wins here that were just undeniably good. Koroshoho, Kitanawaka, and Shonanumi were all taken back by Ichiyamamoto's initial charge. Shonanumi almost got something going with a parry, but he had already stepped out by the time that Ichi hit the ground, so poor luck for him. Ryuden and Ichi had a fair-looking brawl, which ended after Ichi desperately reached for the belt after getting Ryuden to the bales. while in his fight against Sadanumi, the attack on the belt feels far more deliberate, not something thrown out to avoid a prolonged brawl in a panic. It took a moment for Ichi to get his footing before his drive, but once he had the momentum, Sadanumi had no answer to it. That has nothing on his match against Hokuto Fuji. Off the Tachiai, Ichi tried to get his thrusting attacks going, but Hokuto Fuji just got a hold of him. There was a parry attempt, which Hokuto Fuji survived, and then we got an extended lockup near the center of the dohyo from two guys who you don't really get to see that all that often from. Eventually, Ichi did get Hokuto Fuji off balance, and that opened him up for a straightforward Yorikiri. His matches against Roga and Midori Fuji were quite similar to one another. Off the Tachiai, Ichi opens with thrusting attacks and for a while puts up a solid fight. When Roga drives Ichiyamamoto back, it's with a double inside grip. Midori Fuji, on the other hand, simply pushes Ichi's shoulders up and back and drives him out that way. His losses against Onokatsu and Tsurunoumi, on the other hand, were quite different from one another. Tsurunoumi and him have a fairly prolonged Oshi match, hard-hitting, fast, whereas Onokatsu almost immediately fights towards the belt. The similarity lies in how Ichiyamamoto attempts a pull to get out of it, but it only opens him up to the drive that leads to his loss in both accounts. Of course, I, as a premium Ichiyamamoto fan, had to talk about his second match against Wakataka Kage as well. I wish I could say that he managed to pull out a second surprise win against his idol. It just wasn't the case. Waka spun him around and just got into a good position, drove him out. What can you do? The final fight of the tournament for Ichi was against Nishiki Fuji, and I don't really know what happened here, but Nishiki Fuji just got the work done. Ichi tries to get his Oshi going, but it is almost totally ignored by Nishiki Fuji, who just gets shoulder control and drives him out. Unfortunate, making him go 7 wins, 8 losses. It wasn't a long time for him up in the single digits, but I mean, this brings him down from M9 to M10 East. Not a huge loss. November, the last tournament of the year, and one that always proves to be exciting. With the top dogs absolutely slugging it out to start Yokozuna runs, Ichiyamamoto continued his grind. This basho, Ichi was admittedly pretty hot and cold. When on the offense, he looked really, really good. Some of his earlier fights were straight up one-sided. Against Takayasu, Tamawashi, and Shonanumi, Ichiyamamoto gained and kept the momentum off the jump. None of his opponents were able to slow his Oshi down. He was able to just keep attacking the shoulders, keep getting the Nodoa, and he drove them back. He fought Mitake Yumi as well, and while it doesn't look decisive by any means, off the bat, Ichi doesn't really gain any sort of momentum with Oshi, and Mitake Yumi just kind of fights back. They lock up in the middle of the ring, which is where Mitake Yumi should be confident, should have the upper hand, only for Ichi to dig deep and pull out a crazy strong drive. Alright. His fights against Midori Fuji and Hokuto Fuji both included heavy forward momentum. Midori Fuji opens with a Henka attempt followed by a quick charge, but Ishii stops Midori Fuji's momentum completely with a Nodoa and then succeeds in a pull-down attack. Hokuto Fuji's match was considerably much more straightforward, with Ichi surviving multiple pull-down attempts before getting one off of his own. By far, though, the most clean pulling attack that we got to see from him in the November tournament came in a very, very short match against Roga. Simple, Nodoa, pull down. Again, simple, really effective. I love to see it. Even in some of his losses, he looked pretty good. Against Takara Fuji, Toki Hayate, and Meisei, he fought hard. Each and every one of those fights being a total brawl that ends with Ichi's forward balance just being exploited by his opponents. Even though he was losing these matches, they were good fights, he didn't look bad, it just was, it's sumo, it's the way that it goes. His fight against Gonoyama was a very decent showing as well. He survives a pull-down attempt right out of the charge and drives forward, only for Gonoyama's Oshi Sumo to just be too much for Ichi to parry or handle, and it was just too much for him. We also got to see a first-time meeting between Ichiyamamoto and Takeru Fuji, rising upstart. And honestly, I don't think that anyone was really surprised by this match. Takeru Fuji is just too much to deal with. Ichi almost gets the pull down, but he ran out of dohyo before he could finish the move, and it was just Takeru Fuji's win. Finally, the last match of Ichiyamamoto's year. For the fourth time in a row, Ichi goes into day 15 on 7 wins and 7 losses, and who is he up against? 410 Sadanumi. I'll take it, man. Ichi wins off the Tachiai, gets his Oshi Sumo going, and just absolutely beats out the veteran. 8-7 at Maegashira 10 East, a really, really solid record for the end of 2024, and one that would bizarrely see him shoot up 7 whole slots to Maegashira 6 East, his highest rank. There was a lot of stuff going on with the Banzuke, and I was happy with it. And of course, he went into day 15 on 7-7. Okay, that's gonna wrap it up. I was originally gonna try and get this out in December, but I mean, man, it was just pure hubris of me to try and do a big first-time project like this in the busiest time of the year. My bad. Still, though, I had a lot of fun, and I want to do more of these, though I think I'm gonna try and reel back the number of tournaments that I look at. A whole year would have been a lot already, but I went for 8, which was just too much. But if you thought that this was good or you enjoyed parts of it, I'd love to hear it. And if you want me to look at another wrestler that maybe you think doesn't get the love you think they should, let me know. Sometimes, and believe me, I know, sometimes your favorite wrestler isn't the best or most flashy guy out there. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe for more like this, and for live coverage every tournament. And check out our Discord. We've got a great little community in there, and we have a lot of awesome guests that pop in from time to time, like Kinboshi Sumo, 42 Opinions, Let's Learn Sumo, Mainichi Sumo, and we've also had the guys from Grand Sumo Breakdown on also. So, thank you for your time. If you enjoy sumo, subscribe. See ya.